This video is about the fascinating history of Brazil, spanning from the first indigenous peoples to the country's modern challenges. I explain how Brazil transformed from a colony into an independent nation, which events shaped the country, and the cultural as well as political changes it underwent. Thousands of years ago, indigenous peoples lived in Brazil. They hunted, fished, and cultivated plants like manioc. There were many tribes, such as the Tupi and Guarani, each with their own languages. Their villages were often located in the Amazon or along the coast. These cultures left behind pottery and rock paintings. In 1500, the Portuguese Pedro Álvares Cabral landed on the Brazilian coast. He claimed the land for Portugal and named it Ilha de Vera Cruz. The Portuguese wanted wood and wealth. This marked the beginning of colonization. Contacts with the indigenous peoples were often peaceful but sometimes conflict-ridden. In the 16th century, the Portuguese founded the first settlements, such as Salvador. They introduced the system of captaincies, large land grants for settlers. Indigenous peoples were often enslaved or displaced. Trade in Brazil wood was important. Diseases from Europe killed many indigenous people. In the 17th century, sugar plantations became the biggest economic sector. Northeast Brazil, especially Pernambuco, became a center for sugar. The Portuguese brought African slaves to work on the plantations. Sugar made Brazil rich, but the labor was brutal. Slavery shaped society. Millions of Africans were brought to Brazil, especially in the 17th and 18th centuries. They worked on plantations or in mines. Their culture, such as music and religion, strongly influenced Brazil. Many slaves escaped and founded free communities called quilombos. Slavery was cruel and long-lasting. In the late 17th century, gold was discovered in Minas Gerais. Thousands flocked to the region, including Portuguese and slaves. Gold mining brought wealth, and cities like Ouro Preto grew. Portugal strictly controlled the trade. The gold rush made Brazil more important to the colonial power. Jesuit missionaries arrived in the 16th century to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity. They built missions, especially in the Amazon region. The Jesuits often protected indigenous people from slavery, which upset colonists. In 1759, the Jesuits were expelled from Brazil. Many missions fell apart afterward. Portugal governed Brazil through a general governor in Salvador, later Rio de Janeiro. The colony was divided into regions, each with its own rules. Taxes and duties went to Portugal. Colonists had little political power. Dissatisfaction grew in the 18th century. In 1789, there was an uprising in Minas Gerais called the Inconfidência Mineira. Colonists wanted independence from Portugal, inspired by the American Revolution. The leader Tiradentes was executed. The revolt failed but revealed discontent. It was a first step toward independence. In 1808, the Portuguese king João VI fled Napoleon and came to Brazil. Rio de Janeiro became the capital of the Portuguese Empire. The court brought progress like schools and banks. Brazil became a kingdom in 1815, equal to Portugal. The colony was elevated in status. In 1821, João VI returned to Portugal, but his son Pedro stayed in Brazil. In 1822, Pedro declared independence and became Emperor Pedro I. The cry of Ipiranga marked the start. There was little fighting, but Portugal recognized independence only in 1825. Brazil became an empire. The Empire of Brazil, 1822 to 1889, was independent but unstable. Pedro I abdicated in 1831 in favor of his son Pedro II. There were uprisings like the Cabanagem in the north. The economy grew through coffee exports. Slavery remained a major issue. In the 19th century, coffee became the main export. Plantations in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro thrived. Many slaves worked there, later also European immigrants. Coffee made Brazil wealthy, but few benefited. The economy was heavily dependent on exports. Slavery was abolished late in Brazil. In 1871, the law of the free womb freed children born to slaves. Pressure from abolitionists grew, especially in cities. In 1888, Princess Isabel signed the Golden Law, freeing all slaves. Brazil was the last country in the Americas to do so. In 1889, the empire was overthrown, and Brazil became a republic. Military leaders and wealthy coffee growers took power. Pedro II went into exile. The Old Republic, 1889 to 1930, was marked by corruption. Only a few, mostly rich men, could vote. After slavery, many immigrants arrived in Brazil, especially from 1880 onward. Italians, Germans, Japanese, and others settled in southern Brazil. They worked on coffee plantations or started farms. Immigrants shaped cities like São Paulo. Brazil became more diverse. From 1896 to 1897, the Canudos Rebellion took place in the northeast. Poor farmers led by Antonio Conselheiro founded a community against inequality. The government sent soldiers, and Canudos was destroyed. It revealed poverty and tensions in the interior. Thousands died in the conflict. At the end of the 19th century, rubber production grew in the Amazon. Cities like Manaus became wealthy through exports. Workers, often indigenous, suffered harsh conditions. The boom ended when Asia supplied cheaper rubber. The Amazon lost importance. In 1930, Getulio Vargas seized power in a coup. He ruled until 1945 and modernized Brazil. Vargas promoted industry and workers' rights but was a dictator. His period was called Estado Novo. He boosted national pride but suppressed opponents. At first, Brazil stayed neutral in World War II. In 1942, it joined the Allies after attacks on Brazilian ships. Brazilian soldiers fought in Italy. The war brought economic growth. After the war, Vargas was overthrown. In 1945, Brazil became a democracy again. Politics were unstable, with corruption and conflict. Vargas was re-elected in 1951 but committed suicide in 1954. Juscelino Kubitschek built the new capital Brasilia between 1956 and 1961. The economy grew, but debts increased. In 1964, the military took power through a coup. A dictatorship ruled until 1985. Generals suppressed freedoms and persecuted opponents. The economy initially grew, but inequality persisted. Many fled or were tortured, dividing Brazil. In the 1960s and 1970s, Brazil experienced an economic miracle. Industry in cities like São Paulo grew rapidly. Large projects like the Trans-Amazonian Highway were built, but the poor benefited little. The dictatorship used growth to strengthen its power. In 1985, the military dictatorship ended and Brazil became democratic again. In 1988, the country got a new constitution. Tancredo Neves was elected president but died before taking office. Democracy was weak with corruption and inflation. Freedoms returned. In the 1980s and 1990s, Brazil had high inflation. Many people became poorer and the economy stagnated. President Fernando Collor was impeached for corruption. The Plano Real in 1994 stabilized the currency. Brazil recovered slowly. In 2003, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva became president. He was the first worker leader in office. Lula promoted social programs like Bolsa Familia, helping millions. The economy grew through raw material exports, but corruption remained a problem. Since the 1970s, the Amazon has been heavily deforested. Farmers, companies, and miners destroyed the rainforest. Indigenous peoples lost their land, and the environment suffered. International criticism increased, but deforestation continued. The Amazon remains threatened. In 2016, Brazil hosted the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. It was a proud moment, but also revealed problems. Corruption and poverty were visible despite expensive stadiums. The Games boosted tourism, but many Brazilians felt overlooked. The costs burdened the country. In 2019, Jair Bolsonaro became president. He was controversial due to his right-wing policies and statements. Deforestation in the Amazon increased sharply under him. Brazil faced economic problems, especially due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Bolsonaro's time deeply divided the country. Today, Brazil faces many challenges. Poverty, crime, and corruption remain widespread. The Amazon continues to be a global issue, but Brazil is also a country of diversity with a strong culture. It seeks its place in the modern world.